Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Steve Marks. I'm chair of the CMC Board of Trustees and also president of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. It's great to see everyone here today. CMC is pleased to present today's forum, Money in Amateur Athletics, which is sponsored by the Robert Weiler Company and Deloitte, each of whom are represented here by many friends and associates. Won't you please help me thank them? Now, please welcome John McEwen, Deloitte Office Managing Partner, to the stage to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Deloitte is honored to be part of the mission of the CMC as we convene weekly public conversations on the important issues of our times. And certainly, college athletics is an important issue for many of us. College sports are a $13 billion industry. The only ones not making any money are the athletes themselves. Under the NCAA rules, student athletes can receive scholarships and small stipends, but no sponsorships or endorsements of any kind. The state of California is pushing the issue with the passage of a law that allows college athletes to receive pay for endorsements. Navigating this complex issue on the working group for the NCAA is Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith in his 16th year at Ohio State University. Hard to believe. And Gene is widely recognized among the leaders of his profession and has been named one of the most powerful people in collegiate sports. We're all very proud of him, and we're thrilled to have him here with us today. So please join me in welcoming Senior Vice President and Wolf Foundation Endowed Athletic Director at The Ohio State University, Gene Smith. And we're very fortunate to be in the very capable hands with our host, journalist at WSYX, Maria Durant.
Thanks, John.
Maria, it's all yours.
All right. Well, good to see you.
You too. How you been?
I've been great.
Great.
But we have a lot to talk about. So let's get started. Okay.
I didn't know that's why I was here to talk about that topic.
Well, we better stay on that topic because you know there's other things we could talk about.
Let's do it.
All right. You heard that. We can get to some really good questions here. But let's start talking about with money and amateur athletics. You know, John had just talked about the industry, how big of an industry it is. And just this week, Congress right now starting to tackle that issue. Talk a little bit about what the NCAA, I guess, wants.
Yeah, so we have to keep in mind the NCAA is a member-driven organization. There's 1,100 schools across our country, Division I, II, and III. So the issues and the rules and regulations that are in place were voted on by the membership over the years. So what the NCAA wants, what the member schools want, is to be determined. However, we have made a decision as a governance structure that we should try and move into modernizing our intercollegiate athletics and allow student athletes to use their name, image, and likeness to monetize their persona. The question is how. And so right now we're in discussions on how to make that work, at what level, what guardrails we need to put in place. So hopefully in April, when the working group that I'm a part of submits its report, our last report, then we will recommend some ways that it can be done.
And you're a college athlete, so I guess talk a little bit about maybe the struggles that athletes have because they're not being paid.
Well, I don't think it's more about their struggles.
Okay.
It's not about that. This is more about.
I don't know. I've talked to some athletes who say that it can be a struggle. They can't get jobs because they're practicing. They can't, because the time. Their sport takes a lot of time.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So, at The Ohio State University, if you're a full-ride football player and you're non-Pell, student athlete, you're getting $1,750 a month.
Okay.
Plus, we feed you all day, every day. So
maybe those athletes need to.
8 years ago, and some of my colleagues in the audience, we used to have an old rule, stupid rule, where we were not allowed to provide meals all day long. We could provide certain snacks.
Okay.
We eliminated that rule, and so now we can provide unlimited meals all day long. We actually call them fuel stations in our program.
And that's for all sports?
That's for all sports.
Okay.
And it was right. It was needed. However, I'll sometimes see our student athletes walking out with 12 to-go boxes going to the crib, right? But we also provide them meal money. So if you're Pell eligible for 12 months, if you're Pell eligible on a full ride scholarship, you get $2,400 a month. Wow. So I don't know. I'm just old school. I'm a simple math guy. Back in the day when I went to college, if I had that, it'd be a whole new movie. So those who are struggling, we did not do a good job with educating them around financial literacy. That's where the failure has been across the membership. So there's those who know how to manage that $1,750 and those who know how to manage that $2,400. But there's those who don't do well with that, and that's where we got to do a better job.
Right. Well, and I think maybe too, is that rule now something kind of new? So that's been in place for a while.
It's been in place for a long. Well, actually, let's step back. 4 years ago, we added cost of attendance to the scholarship model. The scholarship model used to be full ride, used to be room, board, books, and tuition for 4 decades. As we all know, there's miscellaneous expenses with going to college, and that's your cost of attendance, and each school determines what that is. So we relaxed that rule 4 years ago, so now we're allowed to provide cost of attendance. That's where that cash delta went up. Prior to that, it was a real struggle, but now we're allowed to provide that in the scholarship model. Now also keep in mind, there's sports that are on what we call equivalency. They only get partial scholarships. So if you're on a baseball team, you only may get 20% or 13% or 20, 30% or whatever. You have to come up with the rest. So for me, the NIL space, those are the student athletes I think are going to benefit the most, because many of them leave with debt. So I'm really driven on trying to help our partial scholarship student athletes have an opportunity to monetize their NIL in a big way.
And when you say NIL, that's name,
image, and likeness. I'm sorry. Yep, name,
right.
image, and likeness.
Right. So talk a little bit about then, what is the NCAA looking at trying to do then for these students?
Well, there's different categories. We have 3 groups now that are looking at this. One's called a individual license group. One's called a group license committee, and another one's called a work product committee. The work product is easiest. Justin Fields decides he wants to create a video on the appropriate way to throw the perfect spiral. It's a 10-minute video, and he puts it up online, and he gets pop-up ads and gets paid for that video based upon the number of followers he has. And Deloitte decides they want to sponsor that and put up an ad, and he's paid fair market value for that ad. Those are the things that are being discussed. Or passive endorsements. Total passive endorsements. Mr. Weiler may decide that he has some real estate property and he wants Chase Young to advertise apartments available in this property, and Chase happens to live in that apartment complex, so they asked him to do a commercial. And Chase says it's a great place to live, see my crib, come visit me, and he pays them fair market value for that advertisement. So that is a passive, non-sweat equity type of behavior. The video on the work product where you're actually doing something, there's sweat equity. You're doing something.
Right.
There's an educational component to it. The passive, pure endorsement model is really what California is promoting, along with your ability to get an agent. The group product, the group license is the one that most people understand, makes it easy, is EA Sports. So if a group of student athletes had a relationship with EA Sports and your team is on there, they get paid. So all those things are being discussed.
And now you mentioned California, so they've already passed a law. It doesn't go in effect until, what, 2023?
Right.
So there is some time. What has that done now? Has that really pushed the NCAA then to really take a look at this? And
Yeah, I think
it's going to happen, isn't it?
Oh, it's going to happen. I think the California legislation served as a good pressure group activity to help us move. However, there's 34 other states who have passed laws or have laws teed up to be passed. Some of them, 8 of them, are effective this year. And so that's why there's an initiative, there's a group of presidents working with the NCAA to work with our federal government to try and come up with a national piece of legislation. And fortunately, we have Congressman Gonzalez in this state who is trying to help us with
Former
that.
Buckeye.
Former Buckeye and just a great human being trying to help us create national legislation so we can have consistency across the landscape. Right now, if the state laws are implemented, all states will have different laws relative to what student athletes are able to do. New York has one where 15% of an athletic department's ticket sales has to be distributed to the student athlete population at that individual school. So there's a number of different laws out there, and there's no way that this can survive in its current form if every state has a different law.
Well, and you've gone on record, too, saying that, I mean, you would rather not do business or play California.
No question.
Right, because of that.
If they have the ability, keep in mind the difference for us as opposed to pros or the Olympics is we recruit. You know, you get drafted in the pros, you go where you go. You're playing in the Olympics, fortunately, Tokyo this summer, you play in the Olympics, you play for your country. The nuance in our space is you recruit. So trying to protect the recruiting model to make sure the student athlete and the family has choice without undue influence is important. And that's a challenge. It's a real challenge. If you allow agents to come into the space, which might be okay,
Right.
What's the influence there? And so we just have to make sure we try and protect that model as much as possible. There's improprieties in that space already, we get that, but they're mitigated to a great degree. So how do we create a model where we mitigate the unscrupulous behavior that may occur in that space?
And what about for other sports as well? You know, football, of course, will get endorsements. Well, what about some of the other smaller sports too? How will they be impacted?
Maria. Great question, and that's where I have my passion. I'm really passionate about how do we help our partial scholarship student
Right.
athletes and provide them opportunities. And some of them are our most talented and gifted relative to being able to take advantage of the digital platform. You know, everyone thinks about you know, the brick and mortar type of passive endorsement. That's not the deal. It's the digital space. How do I become an influencer and ultimately create a persona that some company wants to invest in the digital space on all these different platforms? I mean, pretty soon TikTok could be something different. But the reality is, our Olympic sports student athletes need to have an opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness in the local environment based upon their talents and skills. If we have, like last year, Will Grimmer, our great golfer, had the ability to create a video on the appropriate way to play the chip and putt, he may have been able to fill the gap in his scholarship money.
Right.
And I think that there's so many young people in our Olympic sport category that we can help that way, and I want to provide that opportunity if we can.
And as you know, you sit on this committee and you're looking at all these different regulations. How does something like this affect then Title IX when you're
Great
talking
question.
about
Great question.
equality?
So that's one of our challenges. Right now, baseline, if the money flows through, this is a real interesting challenge, if the money flows through the institution,
Right.
then Title IX comes into play. All the activities that I just talked about is market driven. So it would come from
Somebody else contacting.
or
third party.
Yes, if Dick Norris car dealership wants to have a deal with one of our tennis players, then he pays the athlete. It doesn't come through the institution. If it came through the institution, then Title IX kicks in. But otherwise, it's outside the institution. Now, that's the way it would work. However, philosophically, the way we operate in our athletic department, we still have a problem with that. So we would be creative in how do we help our young women who may not have the same persona as our wrestlers have that opportunity. I'll tell the story. I was at Arch Diner this summer, sitting on having a meal, and across the street from Arch City Tavern was, and I was drinking a Diet Coke, by the way, and I saw across the street there's a fashion store on the corner there. I think it's a ladies' fashion store. I don't know the name of it. Somebody's nodding their heads. And I saw 6 young ladies come out of there in clothing and these social media cameras around them, and they're obviously creating some type of video. And I'm like, there's my volleyball team. I mean, so I think differently now, and I just think differently. Obviously, in Columbus, we're a large retail environment, so my team, we'd be trying to cut deals for our women's gymnastics team. And
But
so
then that falls under Title IX, right? It would.
But no, we'd be educate them on how to do it,
Okay.
and then they go do it.
Okay.
And so that would be what we would do. And so but I don't think a lot of schools think that way. One of our challenges is the diversity in our membership. And so we provide, and at the higher level schools, we provide a lot of services to our student athletes that certain schools in our membership can't provide. And there's a reason that the cost of attendance took so long to pass is because some schools couldn't afford it, whereas we could. And so that's our challenge, is recognizing how do we create a system where the Ohio State universities and the Texases of the world can provide these unique opportunities in the right way, but understand that there's a part of our membership that just do not have the capacity to do that.
Well, and I guess too, which is why you want Congress or someone to pass something so that everybody is on the same playing field. Because what if a school then uses that, we do pay to play, and they use it as a recruiting tool?
That's going to happen. There's no question about it. It's going to happen. So one of the things that we're also considering is in those video examples I gave you, the work product examples, can a student athlete use our logo or not? Can they use our athletic facilities or not? Can they say that they're an athlete at The Ohio State University or not? All those things are being discussed. If they have a business, if it's an LLC or 501c3 and they are making money, can they just go to our licensing department, sign up as a licensee and pay the fee and use our logo? All those things are being discussed. At the top of the pyramid, which is where we are, there's no doubt that whatever is created, our program that we'll come up with some slick name for it, and we'll use it in recruiting.
Will it have the something?
Probably not, since we weren't able to trademark the. My teammates failed on me, so at the end of the day, we'll just say whatever. But it's but we will certainly come up. Every school will come up with some type of program around name, image, and likeness that is their program, that parents and recruitable student athletes will hopefully be impressed by. So it's just going to happen, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Is there a timeline? I know you said, April is when you're...
So our working group was appointed last May. We submitted a preliminary report in October of last year to the NCAA Board of Governors. We submitted a plan that we're in right now. We have to submit our final report in April of this year, and then I'm done with that. And then it goes into the membership in a legislative form to be voted on in January 21. So hopefully in 21 we'll have clarity on what can and can't be done. But in the meantime, parallel to that, we have to get some assistance relative to the different state laws, because if if there's not a consistent law across this country, this intercollegiate athletics as we know it today will change significantly.
But then does one supersede the other? Let's say Congress does pass a law and it's not the same with what the NCAA comes up with.
Yeah, we obviously will have to rise our decisions to what they choose to do. There's a concern that they may do something different than what we're thinking. That's why we're trying to work collaboratively. But it might be that they do something different, and then we have to adhere to the law. It's that simple.
Have you talked with Anthony about it at all? Because
Oh,
I
yeah.
know that he is spearheading a bill on that.
Yeah, I talked to
And what does he
Anthony,
say?
and he's like everyone else. He's just trying to position things. And I don't know, did anybody watch the hearing yesterday? There was a hearing yesterday.
There's a couple people.
There was a hearing yesterday,
Yeah.
and it was an interesting hearing. But there was a hearing yesterday, and Anthony opened up the hearing and stated his position. And I think people in the political space are beginning to get educated on this, and we'll just see how it goes.
Because I think, for some it may be, why should they be paid?
Yeah, right. Well, that is the interesting piece, because a lot of this is semantics. So it's not the institutions paying a salary to a student athletes. That's where we have to try to make sure we all are on the same page. We cannot have an environment where student athletes become employees. That's not what we want, and that's what we shouldn't have. So that's the difference here. What we're trying to talk about is a student athlete has a brand, a persona that we help them build, but
Right.
they built on their own. So like other students can, if you're a musician and you're on a full ride scholarship, you have the capacity to go out and monetize your talent and your skill. So where's the space where we can allow the student athlete to have that same opportunity? But the market pays them, not the institution. And that is the difficult balance, because you still have the recruiting piece in there. And then the questions around representation and things of that nature, brand managers and agents. So I really believe that student athletes should be provided that opportunity. The question is how. How do we do that and protect the intercollegiate athletic model?
And Gene, we're going to get to some audience questions in just a bit.
I thought they were just here to eat. What do you mean?
But
You're going to talk to them?
We will. We'll open it up in just a bit. But you've been at Ohio State for 16 years now. Just some of the changes that you have seen come around since you've been there. I know there's been some challenges along the way.
Yeah, a lot of gray hair. But anyway, it's been enjoyable. The blessing to serve the student athletes that we are provided every single year. It's just really, really enjoyable to watch our student athletes grow and ultimately find careers, be it go professional, be it go to grad school, or find a job. That is our focus, is to help our young people ultimately find a career path. 42% of our young people in the middle of January who will graduate in May already know what they're going to do before they walk across the stage. And our goal is to get that north of 90%. Where's Maddie? Maddie runs that program. I change that metric every day, don't I? Last year was 86% that actually knew before they walked across the stage what they were going to do when they got off. And so we're going to try and get that north of 90. But seeing young people graduate, find a career path, and many of them stay here, it's just a rewarding experience. Blessed to have had the leadership. We have one of our trustees in the room, one of my great personal friends, Alex Shoemate. Under his leadership and guidance, and my entire time here with the other trustees, there's some phenomenal things that have happened at the university, let alone in our athletic department. So it's been a blessing.
So how long are you staying?
If I'm healthy and stay passionate and the next president wants me, I'll choose to stay if my wife allows me.
Okay, that's a good answer, isn't it? All right, so let me read one of the questions here from our audience. Again, we're going to open up the floor, but here is some of the questions that have been submitted. Let's see here. What do we have? Let's get a tough one.
I'm 64, there's no tough question.
That's true, you've already seen it. Let's see here. Do you believe that aligning athletes with their purpose, passion, as it pertains to their major and career is important and feasible? If so, does the university have programs or assessment strategies to close the gap as it pertains to the athletes seeking a career that aligns with their purpose and passion?
Wow. That's a great question. You have to read that again. No, I'm just kidding. You know, it's interesting. We really take a personal approach to trying to help our student athletes figure out ultimately what they want to do in life. Sure, there's assessment tools. You know, we require all of our student athletes to take an online assessment so we can determine what their talents, what their skills are.
Because very few make it to the professional level.
Yeah. So that's why I was talking about earlier about helping them find a career path, and we have a strategic plan around that. Maddie actually runs that program, one of our former softball players, and we require all of our sophomores to have resumes. They get personal consultations. We try and figure out what's their passion. It's not just about your skill. What's your passion? And we try and align them with programs. Many of the people in the room, Deloitte's an example, that help us with getting student athletes internships. And quick story, and I'll turn it back to you, is I had a fencing student athlete years ago who walked into my office, national champion, two-time national champion. She spoke 6 languages fluently. She had like a 3.87, majored in business, very attractive. But all her life, she was from Europe, all she did was fence. And she had decided she was done. She was no longer going to chase the dream of the Olympics. And I was sitting in my office, and she showed me her resume that didn't look like a resume, and never worked in her life. Majority of our student athletes who come to us never worked in their life because of the structure that we have created in the K through 12 system around sports, and so it's just so different. So what we did was we created internships, and many of you in this room, thank you so much, who have helped us with student athletes in the summertime getting internships so that they can understand what the work environment is all about. It also exposes them in a way that allows them to think about what is their passion. Right. And so those of you who have helped us, we appreciate that. So we have a very focused effort on aligning our student athletes with their passion so that they can find the right career. And our numbers of student athletes who have gone up for those who want to go to grad school. Because in that, we've determined that, you know what, maybe you ought to get that secondary degree. Let's talk about that. And so we have a very strategic approach on that.
Okay, here's another really good question too. Let me bring this one up too. Are there discussions taking place to address lifting the restriction on student athletes receiving gifts or financial support from friends or families, especially in light of the fact that other students and non-athletes do have similar restrictions? What is the rationale behind the current restrictions?
Wow, that's an old rule, old rule, but it's true. Our challenge is monitoring the behavior of that family or third party. So,
and you just recently had to go through that. Yes,
didn't we? And you know, that's the problem. If you go back to the way it was in the 70s, prior to the new rule, student athletes could have a community host. So the idea would be, you know, I'm from Cleveland, I go to Notre Dame, I don't know anybody, they hook me up with a host. I go to dinner on Sunday, they take me to their church, and you get familiar. But what had happened was all of a sudden, you know, they were getting cars, they were getting trips to, you know, to Hawaii, and they got cash in their pockets. And so the rule came in place in the late 70s, early 80s to prohibit that. And that's really what happened. And it's unfortunate. Because that question is a good one, but the problem is we can't control the behavior of certain people. And our student athletes are susceptible to that behavior that could ultimately get them in trouble. So that's why that rule's in place. It hasn't been looked at in a long time, but that's why it's there.
Is there money available though, or if like you're going to the bowl game or something like that, to get family? Is it just family? I'm sure that there are restrictions on that too. How does that work?
Yeah, so we provide a stipend for families to go to postseason competition. When we went to the championship, we were the school that pushed the envelope on that. Got the College Football Playoff Committee to use our year in the championship as a pilot program to provide stipends, and so we now do that with some of our other sports periodically.
Okay.
So it can be done.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
No questions? I guess we'll go.
Gene wants to eat. I think he's.
Hi, I'm Roy Lelicki from Fisher College of Business at OSU. I think you may have just sort of answered the question, but what are you doing now to keep both the agents and sponsors from going around the athletic department and going directly to the players?
Yeah, a lot of it is education and monitoring behavior, but most of it is education. We're fortunate that our student athletes are responding to that. We remind them constantly of what's at stake for them. And every now and then we have an example of behavior across this country that we put in front of them. We show them what happened at different institutions when they don't adhere to those rules and regulations. So it's mostly education, not just of the athletes, but of our sponsors and boosters and everyone else as well. Great question. Thank you, sir.
And when you
He's got
say
another question.
Just to follow up, are agents a problem in that mix too?
Oh yeah. So they're not as much as a problem as they used to be. And by the way, I really hate the generalization that is, because it's not all agents. It's only a few. And I would hate for all agents to be tainted by the behavior of a few. But there are a few who try and enter that space, who may hire a student who lives in the dorms to befriend one of our student athletes who lives in the dorms. So we have to watch that. There's a few of them. It's nowhere near what it used to be. With the FBI entering our space a couple years ago, it helped in mitigating that behavior. So it's kind of like with this name, image, and likeness piece. Part of our discussion is the IRS engagement, because whatever money you earn, you got to refile your taxes. So I'm of the opinion, use the hammer, which is the IRS.
And when you say too that these student athletes are educated about that, it's not just here's some paperwork and read it.
Oh no, it's constant. It's constant. It's constant. It's constant. It's in small groups. It's like subliminal messages. It's in small groups, constantly behaving in that, educating in that space.
And through their entire year at Ohio State.
Oh yeah, the entire year, and it's not just football and basketball. It's all sports.
Right.
And so we have about 1,000 athletes, 36 sports. So we spend a great deal of time around that educational space. Okay. Great question.
Ann Gabriel, Ohio University, retired. I know the Big Ten and I think the Power Five are advocating a one-time transfer without sitting out a year. For the Justin Fields and Joe Burrows, that's fine. As a member of the Group of Five, I'm worried about poaching, and I wonder if there's anything in your legislation that would help curtail that.
Yeah, so poaching actually happens now. It's just underground. But so what we were doing, frankly, was trying to force the question, because we had two pieces of legislation. Because keep in mind, we have 5 sports that have to sit out. If you transfer, you have to sit out. And all the other sports, you don't. So what we were forcing was to make a decision. Everybody's gonna sit, or nobody's gonna sit. It is very difficult for me, and it always has been, to sit in front of a men's ice hockey student athlete and tell them they gotta sit when my swimmers don't have to. And to say it's revenue generated is the differential I struggle with. I've always struggled with that. And because I have to justify that to a parent, why that tennis player can do it, but my ice hockey player can't do it. So poaching already exists. You know, most of the transfers that you read about or hear about, 90% of them or more, they already know where they're going. And the only way they know where they're going is because somebody helped facilitate the transition. So it's either an AAU coach, it's a high school coach, it's a parent, or a student athlete on that other team. So poaching happens now. So it's what we're trying to force is finally, let's answer the question one way or the other, because the way we're doing it now, we can't keep doing it. Right now there's waivers. So what we have now are young people who are frankly not telling the truth in order to come up with an egregious situation at the previous institution in order to meet the criteria of a waiver. And it's a quagmire. And so somewhere along the line, we got to clean it up. Are there concerns? No question. Will there be more poaching at its different levels? No question. But I think we can all adjust in order to do what's right for the young people. Now, that's just my personal opinion. I probably will lose the vote, but that's just me. Thank you. Go Bobcats.
Hello, my name is Mary Urena, and I'm an alumnus of The Ohio State University. My question relates to name, image, and likeness that you referenced earlier. What about the reverse situation of the universities using the name, image, and likeness of athletes, and to that extent, students? And how should they be compensated for that, and how long should that compensation last?
Yeah, there's no question about it. And that's part of the debate right now, and the argument of those proponents that believe name, image, and likeness for student athletes should be allowed is that schools are doing that right now. They're using student athletes to promote their events and things of that nature. So, but in that space, and again, the diversity of the schools matters. What we provide at The Ohio State is different than what Belmont provides in Tennessee. So, and they use their student athletes differently than we do. And so, to your question, there is no method to compensate student athletes in that space, and it probably won't be. It just won't be. Different schools have different ways that they try and mitigate or minimize how they use student athletes to promote. We, for example, don't sell jerseys with the names on the back. Those jerseys you see are coming from a different part of the world. They're not coming from us. So there's different things that every school does, but I don't see any money flow, to your question, around that happening.
And did that just recently change? Because wasn't there a lawsuit involved with Chris Spielman and his likeness being used? Well, after he would already graduated.
Yeah, that was on a banner situation, not the jerseys. We were already doing the jersey rule deal for us, but that was on a banner situation. Yeah, and that's been resolved. Obi, you got a question, man? What do you want?
My name is Obi Stiller. How y'all doing?
Former Ohio State Buckeye as well.
First of all, I want to commend you and the university just being forward in the aspects of ideation for athletes, current athletes, and for former athletes. So I just appreciate that, because you being a former athlete, you bring a different perspective, and I think you represent the athletic community extremely well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That being said, he's gonna drill you now.
With that being said,
is this like the first date?
Right. Slow motion. Kind of two questions. One, what can we do as former athletes to kind of aid the university, even in aspects of mentoring for current athletes in a way that would be beneficial to the university, and then also within guidelines, within restrictions, because there's so many former guys that would love an opportunity to add something positive to the university and the athletic experience of many of these athletes that are coming from diverse communities. So that's one question. What can we do as former athletes? And then the other question was, could you just share a little bit of why education is such at the forefront of your mission. I think that's probably one of your legacies that once it's all said and done, you'll leave behind, is that you've always desired the athletes, whether current or I can speak as a former athlete, you've always pushed education. One of the things, I actually have a group called the Obie's Breakfast Club, and I shared it with Gene probably a few years ago, and he asked me, were there any women in the group? And I said, no. And he said, idiot.
Why not?
and I said, well, I just, it's just some guys that he said, do you know how many women CEOs are in Columbus? Do you get it? Well, I'll tell you this. We had our first breakfast club this of 2020, January 16th, and the first aspect or Breakfast Club 101, I think the most I had was 23 individuals that came to the Breakfast Club. And then last month, or in January, January, we had over 70 attend the Breakfast Club with your recommendations of opening up, being more inclusive. So I really appreciate that. So it was really awesome. So back to my question, how can we help as former athletes? And then as far as the legacy of education, why is that such a passion of yours?
So thank you, Obie, and again, congratulations on the Breakfast Club. I know it's a great platform for people to come together. The former athletes, I think, need to take the initiative to get engaged. And we do not have a structured program for former athletes to mentor current athletes. But we do have a number of former athletes who do that. We have it around our professional development program for those student athletes who are getting ready to go pro. It's called our Complete Athlete Program underneath the Leadership Institute. We look, the athlete needs to engage us. So like if you're interested, you need to let us know, and then we'll line that up the right way. And it's usually not one-on-one. It's usually in group situations. And so we would have you come in and talk about X in your space, talk about what you do. So we really don't have a structured program around that. Education, I'm a product of intercollegiate athletics. I was blessed. Phone rang. That's $1,000 in this fundraiser. But anyway, I'm a product of intercollegiate athletics. I had two great parents, but they couldn't afford to send me to college, and so I became an athlete and got a 4-year degree and went to school and received an education that I'm blessed to have received because of athletics. And my mission is to make sure that we stay true to the reason we recruit you. We recruit you because you're a great athlete, but also because you have an opportunity to get a great education. And I'm a complete idiot around that. And all of our programs are about that, making sure you get your degree and then a career. We've created an environment now where I don't even worry about our student athletes getting a degree because they're going to get it. They have to self-select out. So now I'm passionate about making sure they have a career, have a job when they leave us, or go pro, or go to grad school. I just philosophically believe education opens doors for a lot of people. And grew up on the east side of Cleveland with basically 7 guys, and there's only 3 of us left. And the reality is, those were the guys that got an education. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just very passionate about it.
And I know many do, if they do go pro, will come back and actually get their education.
Oh, no question. Yeah, that's right? What Obie, I think, was talking about. We have, and I inherited when I came here, my team has kind of elevated it, a program where student athletes can come back and complete their degree. And we have an individual that's assigned to that. It's called our degree completion program. We fund that education. Regardless if you're Greg Oden and made millions of dollars, we still fund it. But we fund it. And we work with the NBA and NFL because they also have some funds available to help them. Michael Redd did that, getting his master's through Indiana with our help with the NBA, and we have a current athlete that's doing that right now. So I'm really focused on trying to help them finish their degree. And Nick Mango finally got his. He left with 1 credit hour old. And we're beating him up while he was in New York trying to get his butt back here to finish that 1 credit hour. He finally did it. I'm so proud of him. Like he really needed it after all those millions, but he got it done.
Hi, Rochelle O'Connor. I'm a retired professor of teacher education, so I thank you for your advocacy for education.
Thank you.
I kind of have a 2-part question. Not every university is the Ohio State University. In fact, we're probably all aware that the public universities here in Ohio spend more money on sports than they earn. And I've seen that personally cause a hardship at the university at which I taught because, frankly, we lack the resources. We're not Ohio State. So I'm wondering what the NCAA's take is on recognizing that it does create hardships for the universities that can't compete, that can't, have a budget that's what do you call it, at zero level, whatever you accountants call it. And then secondly, second part of the question is the NCAA taking a look at HR 5528, which was an act, a bipartisan bill proposed in 2019 that serves as an advisory council, if you will, to the well-being of athletes. It's backed by the Drake Foundation, which studies that very issue.
Yeah, on the first issue, keep in mind they keep talking about the $13 billion that the NCAA generates, and it's represented inappropriately because, yes, those dollars are generated, but it's dispersed throughout the membership. Wherever you taught, I kind of want to ask you where you were, but I won't. But where?
Wright State University.
Oh, great. So at the end of the day, the Wright State University received a share of the revenue through the NCAA, primarily through the NCAA basketball tournament. Most of the money of the NCAA, from the NCAA is through the basketball tournament. The NCAA does not run college football. The college football playoffs is separate from the NCAA. So all that $13 billion is mostly basketball. And it's distributed throughout all 1,100 schools, Division I, Division II, and Division III. So that money is in place. And then just like the models are locally, like at Ohio State, all the other sports are supported by football and men's basketball. All the rest, some may generate a little revenue, but certainly no profit. And so that's the model. However, the decisions, like at Wright State, are local. I don't know how many sports they had. I don't know at what level they funded them. I was at Eastern Michigan University, and we ended up dropping sports at Eastern Michigan University because we could no longer continue to be a drag on the university. We're receiving 47% of our budget from the university, and so we ended up dropping 4 sports and to take it down south of 30%. And so every decision in that regard is local, and how you value or don't value the intercollegiate athletic experience. And I apologize, I'm just not familiar with the legislation you alluded to. I haven't read up on that one.
You could encourage Anthony to look at that. Why reinvent the wheel? There's already something in place from last year that's moving forward as a bipartisan bill.
And that's from the Drake Group?
Yep.
Great, thanks. Good. Thank you.
All your comments.
Oh, wait a minute. We can't be doing the lobbyist stuff in the room. That's like a cell phone going off. We're going to charge you.
Hi, Jean. I'm Tori Prokop. I'm a former synchronized swimmer at OSU and now at the Columbus Foundation. First off, just thank you for being such an incredible advocate for every athlete from football to synchronized swimming. I never felt less important because our sport is not as big as football. So thank you for that.
Girl.
I'm saying, yeah, it felt like a big deal there to be a synchronized swimmer, which growing up it's like, what is that? But at OSU, you're recognized. So thank you for that. I just was curious what you're doing, what the administration's doing to protect student athletes' time. I know that there's a 20-hour limit per week of practice time, not including travel to and from meets. So yeah, there were times that I would get passed up for internships because I couldn't commit to a 20 hours a week internship that I needed to graduate, on top of trying to practice, on top of trying to get my schoolwork done. So just curious how that has evolved through the years and what you're doing to make that
It's even worse today. It's, it's really challenging. It really is, because we we're blessed like you, where we have top of the pyramid athletes, and they want to put in the time to be national champions. By the way, who knows what sport at Ohio State has won more national championships? Synchro.
Yeah.
But anyway, so thank you very much, Corey. So no, it is a major issue for ours, and actually is part of the challenge we have around mental health issues, is that stressor and trying to help our student athletes. So it's more about education. It really is. A little bit about education around our coaching staff, our strength and conditioning staff, that whole support circle of care that you had around you, is making sure we watch that. But it's a challenge for us, no question about it.
Optional mandatory practices, making sure that
get
they're
out of here.
actually optional would be a
Optional,
good place.
right.
Yeah, just optional. But
Yeah,
thank
you
you
better
very
show
much.
up.
Yeah, you better be there.
But you're right. I mean, that's one of the big things that I don't think we had Teamworks when you were there. Teamworks is a new online program we put in place where, as administrators, we can watch team practices and see the amount of time that student athletes put in. But it's still an issue. There's no question about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on your job.
Thanks.
Are you in the Buckeye Club yet?
Look who's doing fundraising now.
That's $1,000 right there. I hope you found today's forum entertaining and enlightening. It's amazing how complex this issue. At face value, it seems simple, but when you start looking at it, it gets really complex. And let's thank our sponsors and partner, the Robert Weiler Company. And also Deloitte. And of course, our speakers, Gene Smith and Maria Durant. And special thanks to all of you. We look forward to seeing you next week at the Metropolitan Club.